So you want to build an exhaust on a budget. All right, strap in. This isn't gonna be your average clean build with shiny parts kind of deal. Nope, we're diving in head first into a scrapyard special. Enter a turbo Jeep, Alex from Legit Street Cars throwing down a challenge, and us accepting it like maniacs. The kicker, we're working exclusively with leftover scraps. Yeah, we're talking a Frankenstein level of assembly here. This isn't just about slapping together some pipes and calling it a day. We need to preserve that glorious turbo whistle and make sure this thing doesn't cook itself or us in the process. We've got heat zones to navigate, a wastegate to wrangle, and the ever-present threat of catastrophe lurking around every corner. Sounds fun, right? Well, stick around because what we lack in budget, we make up with creativity, stubbornness, and a touch of chaos. By the end of this, we might just have a turbo Jeep exhaust that sounds so wild, even Alex would be surprised. Or it'll go up in smoke. Either way, you don't want to miss this. Is that an aluminum exhaust downpipe?
Currently, yes. Yes, it is. That would be an intake, a piece of leftover. That's a piece of leftover intercooler piping just to get here.
Does it fit under the hood with the intercooler and everything?
I don't know.
You're imagining it would.
I imagine it wouldn't fit with this, but that was just to get here so it wouldn't destroy my battery. And do you have any scrap material laying around the shop? Because this is kind of a budget build.
Budget? You're
Yeah.
coming here and saying the word budget to me.
Scrap. I said scrap too.
Budget and scrap. Oh man. Well, that's like 3 inches. It's pretty common size for us. So yeah, I probably got a fair bit. I probably have mufflers too, dude.
Okay.
You don't want, I mean, what do you want? Like what?
Okay, so you heard the turbo when I pulled up.
Yeah.
Right? I want all the turbo noises that this thing can make, just like we have now, but minus the exhaust noise being right next to the turbo. So just a regular tailpipe. I mean, it could be a sleeper and just look like a normal Jeep out in the back here. And then as long as it's free flowing enough to, you know, keep up with the, I don't know what this thing is going to make, dude. Like 300 wheel max. But I want it to sound like that turbo-wise.
You want to hear the turbo still.
I want to hear the turbo.
You know, I think because this thing's going to be fairly simple, we can keep it budget. That's not usually a word that I like to use, but if I'm using stuff, the big issue honestly is how quick do you need this done?
I mean, you hear the turbo? OJ, I want to drive this thing, man.
So I'm going to assume that you want it done quick.
Quickish.
And now we got a budget on there, so I can't even order stuff if I want. We're going to have to do this, hopefully with stuff I got laying around. Hopefully I've got mufflers, but because it's 3-inch, I think we could probably come up with something that still sounds good, but I can't promise you how many pieces it's going to take to do it.
I don't care. I don't care.
You're going to beat it up on the trails anyway,
I mean,
so what is it?
Yeah, I really don't care.
All right, that sounds,
It's a challenge, OJ.
it actually sounds like a challenge that might be fun to do, except I'm the guy thinking about how to get it done. Cody's the one who's going to have to cut it apart, so he might not be as enthusiastic as I am. I think we come up with something cool for you.
All right, cool.
That solves all those problems and gets us out of this challenge.
All right.
By the end of the week.
Good deal. Yes.
The thing that I'm not thrilled with just on the setup is that charge pipe next to the starter. I think that's going to give you heat problems down the road. And like, it sounds trivial, but I've seen it too many times where I think if maybe we add an extension onto that and just have it loop up a little bit more and come back.
I did have to bend that. That pipe was literally on the starter, and we had to bend it out of the way.
I've been there, done that too many times.
Yeah.
Had part started the starter, and like, it's not a problem right away, but then summer comes and it's a problem and you're stuck. And
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, so
Something else on that pipe that really sucks is the wastegate. It is down there, and it's just a 90-degree T. It's in a horrible spot.
That guy there, huh?
Yep, that's the wastegate. It's not connected to anything.
It's just kind of flowing right now, right?
Yeah, like I didn't hook up any vacuum to it or anything yet because we're not.
Oh, you know what? In that extension, we might be able to add a better flow, because
a proper
a 90 is never a good
yeah.
like angle for a wastegate. Ideally, you want all of the flow be going towards the wastegate and the divergence being as long as you can, flow it, because you're going to actually spend more time in wastegate time-wise than you would ever in boost.
Yeah.
So having it at a 90 tends to create boost creep and other things like that where you overshoot.
Now, as far as wastegate position, do we want to have it closer to the turbo? Does it make a huge difference?
It does, because ideally you want it as close to the turbo as possible, because then you just have delay, or you have a delay between the two.
Mm-hmm.
Just there's it's basically allowing the bypass, but then it has to wait that whatever amount of time for the heat and pressure to actually get there when it's bypassing it. So it can't create, like, having it close is possible, but is it going to be that huge of a difference on something of this power? I don't think so.
We're probably going to run 10 psi.
I think we can keep it down there, and it'll be okay, or just better locate it in that section.
Yeah.
Aluminum exhaust. What are you doing to me, man? Although they work pretty well.
Dude, it's just stuff.
No, I'm saying,
I just clamped on because it was going to heat up that battery like crazy.
There are whole companies that make aluminum exhausts. It's just,
love it. Yeah. I mean,
that actually should work pretty decent. The only problem is you got to replace them pretty regularly.
Oh, these things?
Yeah, they don't.
Yeah, this was like this cheap $19 one from Amazon. Kind of trying out all the cheap crap on this thing.
No, I mean, like, they work. It's just the life on them, because they heat and contract, and the moisture gets in there, and eventually they just start deteriorating. But they last for a good while. They do the job for the time being. So. Oh, I want this thing.
Wait, what's the Jeep wave?
Is this like two fingers? Right? Is that it? It's like
It's just a peace sign.
I gotta learn it if I have this Jeep.
I don't know if you want this one, Keller. It's
What?
exactly what you hate. All right, so Alex asked us to do an exhaust for this, but he gave us a challenge. He wants a budget exhaust.
We don't really do budget.
Yeah, so I was trying to think of how we could do budget, and you're gonna probably hate me for that. You know all the stuff that you cut up to make other stuff that we have
Yeah.
in a bin? And then all of the pieces of mufflers that we've taken off other cars and used and not used, and we're gonna
Okay.
try to make something out of stuff we have lying around. I volunteered you for that.
Oh, thanks.
You're welcome. So let's take a look. I figured you'd appreciate the exhaust he's got on here now.
Yeah? Is it this thing sticking out of the hood? Oh, that's aluminum too?
I don't think he wants aluminum. I think this is just
Oh,
what he did for the time being, but
Nice and
nice and tight on there.
that's good for it.
So basically, and I kind of took a look at this with him, but we've got to make a downpipe into an exhaust that goes down over the axle and out. He's not looking for anything fancy. He actually is okay with the volume it is now. So we actually don't need too much muffling, but he wants to keep all the turbo whistle. So my thoughts, this is 2.5 currently. We probably need to bump up the diameter a little bit in order to kind of keep those whistle tones and everything else in there.
Probably just go up to 3-inch.
At least 3-inch. And I mean, I wouldn't want to go much bigger, but I think it just depends on what we're going to have, because I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of mixed and matched together pieces, and we're going to use whatever we can. But I already saw kind of a problem that, let's see if you agree with me on this or not. The starter down there,
Uh-huh.
I don't like when a hot pipe runs by the starter. So as much as we would just do this exhaust, and you'll probably have to put it up, but I was wondering if we could like but it creates a problem. Either loop this, make this tighter so that way it hugs closer to that that suspension mount point there, so, further away from the starter, or loop it back further in the corner. The only problem I see with that is that if it loops back further, and I think that would be the easier way, you have to get this guy to snake down and around. So I think maybe going closer would be better. But we also need to optimize the wastegate as well, because I don't know if you see the Chinesium he's got on there, but
Yeah, then
not only is that a junk wastegate, but that is less than ideal plumbing for a wastegate. I mean, that's a hard right angle, and I doubt that that's doing a great job, if any, of keeping that flow regulation before the turbo for control like very even or
right.
even safe, you know. If we're gonna be in there and we're gonna be responsible for the exhaust, then we might as well try to do what we see is bad better. So the big challenge is, do we have enough pieces to make this work? And how sane are you right now, and how sane will you be at the end of this?
All right, so we're gonna start taking this thing apart. I kind of want to start with this awesome aluminum exhaust here. This just looks like it's an intercooler pipe. Nice.
So when a fabrication shop says scrap, you probably want to know what that means. And what that means is basically when Cody makes his exhaust systems, he's taking preformed metal that we have, that we've paid for, and piecing those pieces together. But not every piece of that section that he has is used in the system. And we'll set those aside for later, because he might be able to use that bend if he needs it in some other system. But when we're talking scrap, sure, there's some of this stuff that falls directly off of the bandsaw after we've cut it, but we're talking more about stuff that we have laying around. And Cody, where's the box elbows that you got?
Yeah, right here. This is my box of shame and drops and stuff.
So ideally, we're going to want longer sections than other pieces, because we got to make up that distance. And, you know, he'd hate to do something like this, to get it all together. Although, I guess when he says budget, it's more budget in what the materials are and not budget in what our time's going to be. But something like this might be great if we can find a way to use it. This piece already, you know, a cutoff, something that went wrong. You know, Cody said box of shame. And but as you can see, we've got a few bends that we might be able to do a lot with, you know. Even the leftover V-band we might be able to use. So this is one of them. And what I was talking about before, these are typically what we use as far as the materials go when we build an exhaust. These bends will have different radiuses depending on what we're using it for. So what is this, maybe a 5-inch?
Yeah, it's like a 5.5 inch radius.
5.5 inch radius, and that's the radius of this is what you measured in. The tighter the radius, the smaller that number, the closer these ends are going to be together, the tighter the bend. We only use mandrel bent stainless steel. Different sizes. A lot of times, though, we're having to order that. That's a 180-degree bend. This is a 45-degree bend. And then 180 is usually 290s, so we can save money sometimes, but you can also get 90s with straight legs on the end here, give you a little bit more. But all of the stuff that he doesn't use on other projects ends up either here or other stuff we have laying around. So we're just kind of taking account of what we're going to be able to work with here. All right, I hate to even ask this since we're just trying to get an exhaust done in the car, but is there any way we could add a megaphone on there?
I got some stuff over here that we might be able to use.
Okay.
So these guys are what we get from when we make a 3-inch megaphone. So we get this guy kind of left over. We have a ton of them. And then we have these for the 3.5-inch megaphones.
You might be able to piece something together. It wouldn't be our typical setup, but you might be able to get something together.
Yeah, might be able to make something work.
So yeah, as we make the megaphones, Cody has to size up where they go, where they can fit in the bend. That determines usually the length of these. We try to keep them all pretty uniform, but we have different megaphones for different applications. And these are the leftovers more or less, but they might actually finally come in handy because as you can see, they just kind of pile up here. Oh, how would that sound?
I don't know.
I mean, he's happy with the sound now, but could we make it sound worse?
I mean, I don't know what this would do, but
I mean, it'd be like a chambered muffler, except you'd be going up and down and up. I don't know. Maybe we'll mess with it a little bit because he's happy with the way it sounds. So, you know, you hear a lot of turbo. I don't think we could really add any. I mean, you could add rasp if we split it by the end or something like that. But if we're just doing a single diameter exhaust out of a turbo, it should be pretty hard to mess up as long as we're not using some funky muffler or something like that. Mm-hmm. You know, the piping diameter, I don't know. We're going to play around with this one because he's basically given us free reign. And if we've thought of something that we want to try, we can try it. So we might get a little goofy on this just to see what comes up. But we'll have to see what's laying around. That would take up about 2.5 feet there of space.
Yep.
I mean, it's a lot of welding, but you're going to do a lot of welding anyway. So
Yeah.
doing the welding for the views, this might be the trick here.
How many megaphones is this?
Technically, it's
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is this
It's-
a 6
it's,
megaphone
it's
system?
6, but it's 3 technically, if what we consider a megaphone isn't. But
This is the Guinness World Record book holder for megaphones.
Now,
I've seen it here first.
I would never do this on a normal setup. But since you gave us free reign and we're curious to try, I've never stacked this many together. So we're gonna find out together, I guess. So.
It's already going to be a weird sounding vehicle. It's a straight 6. They kind of sound like a tractor, and now it's going to sound like a megaphone tractor, I guess.
It's
But,
going to keep
yeah.
all that turbo whistle, I guarantee that. I
Okay.
just don't know what sort of sound dynamics it's going to create, and
All
I
right.
guess we're going to find out.
Cool.
You know what I'm really worried about, though, is that what if this actually ends up sounding really good, and then people ask us to start building this? So,
That's a good problem to have.
all right, this $1,200 eBay turbo kit is causing a problem that we can't just leave alone, which is the up pipe going to the turbo is really close to the starter and crossing over some wires. Really can't leave it that way. I run into too many issues with cars where the pipes run near the starter and it just heats up way too quickly and causes starting issues. So I asked Cody to look into it. So my thoughts are maybe like make the pipe more looping and make it longer, but what are you doing here, Cody?
All right, so there was a section over here that had the original wastegate on it. So I actually just cut that section out, rotated this up, and turned this in, and I shortened it about 6 inches.
Oh, wow.
And so now we can fit in there.
So you shortened it.
Yeah, shortened it.
Oh, okay. I wasn't even thinking of being able to shorten it. That looks
Yeah.
great, too.
All right. Yeah, it should come out pretty good. And we're a lot further away from the starter, so
A lot further away, and those wires as well.
yep, we're not
And-
touching nothing.
And you still got room to be able to get the downpipe down and through there, so that looks great. Now we'll have to figure out what to do with the wastegate placement. It really was in a bad spot to begin with, and ideally it would be better close to the turbo, but it doesn't have to be. You want it on a bend so the flow goes directly into it as opposed to being bypassed to let it off of the pipe like it was before. So if we could find it on a bend, placing it, that would be much better for control of boost, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. But maybe fitting it down here would not only give us the ability to control boost a little bit better, but also manage routing of the dump tube, whatever we're going to do with that. And who knows, maybe we'll do something crazy. Maybe we should put a megaphone on the dump tube.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Now, when you're doing wastegate placement, I had talked about the problem originally with the wastegate is that it's at a 90-degree angle, meaning that the pressure coming up has to hit the turbo before it really can be directed this way. When you're doing plumbing, it's always best, and this is a rule that plumbers have, is to try to keep away from 90-degree angles on things that have to flow well. And in reality, pressure is no different inside of exhaust. Like if you have to direct flow inside of this thing in a way in order to control boost, a 90-degree angle just isn't that efficient. So the idea would be to take this 90-degree angle and do something where the flow was actually pushing into the wastegate. So let's just say something like this, where as the flow came up on the pressure side of the turbine, it would easily be able to come inside of here and out, as opposed to having to hit the turbine, build pressure up, and then escape from the 90-degree angle. So Cody's got to figure out a place to put that and ideally you want it closer to the turbo, but that being said, you also need it in a place that makes sense. This really wouldn't make sense because it might be hitting the hood somewhere. So probably going to be down lower in the pipe, and he's got to find an angle that will be better than this, but also at the same time fit in the car and not hit things and cause other issues. And then also be easy for us to get the dump tube back out into the exhaust somewhere or outside of the exhaust, but it's got to make sense.
All right, so we kind of got, the downpipe figured out layout-wise.
Uh-huh.
I threw this flex pipe in there because, Jeep.
Yeah, it's smart.
Flexes.
Yep.
The only issue that I see is we're kind of getting back close to the starter, but I think it's enough room to be safe.
Is there any way you can air towards the body, towards the top more there, though?
Go up.
Like if you shortened it, do you know what I mean? Like it would pull it back and up.
Oh,
you know?
yeah. Yeah, I can shorten it up a little bit and it'll
Yeah, I know.
get a little
You've
closer.
kind of got it all lined up and ready to go, but
Mhm.
if you could, like you just said, it's by the starter. I'd rather just give it more of an air gap there than not,
Yeah,
But-
and then the rest of this will just be closer.
I like the flex joint, and this came down really nice into whatever contraption we made here.
Yeah. This setup is going to work better than just a normal, 90 off setup. As you can see, I'm in a bend and I just kind of 45'd off, and now we're going into the wastegate. So now that the flow is going to actually be able to transition very smoothly, and there isn't going to be some weird turbulent issue going on. And then we're going to kind of figure out where we're going to throw the exhaust, but this is just how much smoother it is versus the original. And then for here, this is kind of where it was in the stock place.
Is that the same size as this?
3-inch?
Like where that terminates?
Here?
Yeah.
That's 3-inch, yeah.
Okay.
And that's 3-inch.
How much would you choke me if I told you to flip it around? I like the gradual better than I do the ending. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
So it looks like you just got the tax on here. I'd
Yeah.
like the gradual entrance as opposed to the more abrupt, if that makes sense. I know it's pretty close either way, but that definitely is more gradual. So I'd like to end abruptly. I don't know if it'll make a difference or not, but as far as megaphones go, I know they work better the more gradual you get into the megaphone.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited to hear what this thing sounds like.
Just shorten that guy up, just like I said, to give us a little bit more air gap towards that starter, and then flip this thing around, and we'll go from there.
Cool. All right, so we got the exhaust kind of in place and where it's going to live. And I was going to do the up over the axle section with this 90, but we got into a little bit of a fitment issue here because we're going to be running into the axle. So basically, I have to shorten this guy up a little bit, and this is going to be my fix. We're going to take out this part of the megaphone section and replace it with this. That way we got about 5 inches or so. That way we'll be able to clear the axle without even, changing much. So I don't think it's gonna affect any of the sound that the super awesome megaphone is gonna make, but we'll definitely have enough clearance now.
All right, so Cody's got more or less the exhaust system mocked up. We've got all the clearance issues figured out of us actually going from the turbo down to that crazy multi-megaphone setup that we have on there. And we've not done anything about going over the axle yet, mainly because we just want to hear how loud this is going to be, maybe pick up on a few of its sound characteristics. So that way we know if we've got to change anything in the rear end, maybe make this more tame. If it's a little too unruly, we can still do that, but this will give us the general direction. And it's actually a normal step in our exhaust building process, especially if we're dialing in the megaphones. And if you want to see more how we use megaphones and figure out that, we've got a video. I'll drop the link in the comments. But go ahead and start it up, Cody. Well, it's got a lot of depth to it. It actually kind of sounds like a diesel, which makes a lot of sense since this is an inline 6 with the turbo. So the fact that it sounds like a diesel makes complete sense in this setup. But I think it kind of came out pretty unique. So we're gonna go ahead. It doesn't sound too crazy loud to me like this. I think we might be able to get away with minimal to no muffling sound control. We might step down the exhaust pipe just to keep some of the drone. That's the one big thing about having a crazy big exhaust setup going over the diameter. Not only in a naturally aspirated car can you run into areas where too big of a piping diameter will cause you not to make as much power, but you could also induce a really nasty drone that just vibrates and resonates into the vehicle. So we want to keep that from happening. And we might have to do that in the tailpipe section going over, but it's hard to tell at this point. I'll probably have Cody just check out cruise real quick, see if he notices too much drone. But it's always hard to tell because if the exhaust is terminating underneath the car, you're going to have it vibrate a little bit more. So he's going to do some testing. We're going to check it out, but we're kind of pretty close to how this thing should wrap up. All right, so I had Cody ride it in the air, and we could kind of pick up that there was just a little bit of resonance, which is going to translate into some drone in the cabin. And on a performance setup like this, it might not be a big deal, but if he has to drive it somewhere a long distance, it might be a big deal. And that's probably the fault of playing around with that up and down, up and down. It's just going to create some funky resonance noise characteristics, even though it kind of sounds very funky with the turbo whistle in there. But we're going to go ahead, try to see if we could fit a resonator somewhere in there, or at least close down the tailpipe diameter just to kill a little bit of that. Hopefully it doesn't take away from the turbo whistle too much.
All right, so now we have the tricky part. We got to go up and over the axle, by the gas tank, and out. So being on a budget, we're still using scraps. We're going to kind of figure out what we're going to use. Right off the bat, I see, a 45, a 90, and some straight to kind of get us up and over into this area. Let's go see the scrap ends and see what we got. Looks like we can use this as a 90 to go up and over. That's a good piece. Let's see. Oh, there's a 45 that we can use. There's a good piece. And there's some straight that we can use. All right, so here's our final product with the pieces that we found in the box of shame. Let's kind of go see if it fits the way I want it to. All right, so as you can see, we're up and over the axle, and from this point, we're just gonna kind of come straight and then 45 over, and probably 45 over out. All right, so we got this exhaust all finished up, and we're gonna fire it up, see what it sounds like. Hopefully it sounds pretty good. All right, so that wasn't quite what I was expecting. Kind of sounds trumpety. We're gonna try one of these ultra quiets on there and see if that gets rid of that trumpeting noise. Let's see what it does now. Oh. All right, well, as you could hear, it took away all that trumpeting noise and kind of made it sound a little better. But the only issue is we lost the turbo whistle, which is probably going to be a downfall.
So as Cody just explained, you're kind of toying with the pros and cons of each setup. Now, this highlights two things that I talk about often on exhaust building. Number one being piping diameter. Now, again, people keep getting on me for this 1 inch per 100 horsepower, but it isn't just a power thing. It's also how the sound responds in that tubing diameter. If you don't have enough flow inside of that piping diameter, and the piping diameter is too big, you induce a lot of weird sound characteristics as highlighted by this. Those sound characteristics we're trying to induce are actually the turbo whistle, but as you can see, we're also getting a little bit of rasp and just uncleanness in there, even though it's more or less a straight through system. The other thing it highlights is how well these vibrant, super quiet resonators work. I mean, you could hear just one of them cuts it way down, makes it more livable, and which is why we use a lot of these towards the rear end of the car. The closer you get them to the back, the more it can do in the system as opposed to using them up front to control drone and some of the other rasps, some of the other weird characteristics in the car. But this is just a really explicit example of how a perforated core wrapped up in a material for sound deadening really can change the sound quality of the exhaust system. However, because we're trying to keep all of that turbo whistle and make Alex's build a little bit more unique, we won't be going with this style exhaust tip. So we're probably going to be going with something a little bit more recognizable for Jeeps than this muffler sticking out the back.
OJ, it basically sounds like a Lamborghini now, right?
If a Lamborghini qualifies as a tractor still, yes, then
Yes.
it sounds like a Lamborghini.
Yes. So Lamborghini originally was like a tractor company, so it could sound like a Lamborghini. All right. Well, right off the bat, it's not making any, exhaust noise from here, so that's great. That was the goal. So nice and quiet right here. Nothing at all. That sounds great. This is a straight 6 engine. That sounds really cool. I don't even know what to compare it to, but it's like, it's deep and throaty and kind of muscly and cool. Something else that's cool is this tailpipe. I mean, look at this. Like, if you see that quality of an exhaust in a Jeep Wrangler, you know something's going on. No. What? Oh my God. Dude, you weren't kidding about it still having all of its turbo noises.
I honestly think we amplified all of the turbo noises, but what's bothering me is that little bit of trumpety rasp that you hear at the beginning.
Dude,
I know we would be able to dial that out in our typical system, and that's really what I fight.
OJ is a insane perfectionist, especially when it comes to exhaust and pretty much everything else. I love it, OJ. So you can it's literally perfect for me.
I'm actually impressed that this design amplified the turbo noise so well and kept all of it, because I mean this thing's screaming, and so much as we put even a one resonator on there, it's all gone.
Guys, this is insane. I seriously, I didn't know what to expect when I started this whole Jeep turbo adventure, but this is awesome. This is awesome.
That charge pipe they sent you, Cody, what'd you end up having to do with that?
The charge for the up pipe, I had to cut it 6 inches shorter because the placement that was coming up was way too close to the starter. So actually, the original plan was to make it longer, and I looked at, I cut the tube, and I looked at it, and I was like, well, maybe I can just sneak it up, and it actually gave it more clearance than if I made it longer. So I shortened it about 6 inches, and we had probably 3 inches more clearance from the starter. And then we were also right next to the lines for the starter. So I ended up, taking off the up pipe, scooting everything over. I unhooked one of the main chassis grounds, and moved it over like 12 inches onto the firewall. And now we have all the room in the world for it.
It's tough. It looks proper. I don't know what it is, but the turn, I've always liked turn down.
No, I love turn downs
I think
too.
it looks great.
It just, you can't really like put them on Euro cars, you know what I mean?
No, exactly. That's more of an American car type of thing. But if it was sticking straight out, I think it'd look weird.
I did, and
Yeah.
it does have a little drone and rasp in it, so I was trying to like force it out and away so it doesn't vibrate the car too much, because underneath, just driving it on the lift, you can kind of hear it start to reverb. in there.
It looks far
So-
enough away to not
it
cause
does.
any issues, but
I don't know.
Yeah.
Like the idea here, I doubt you'll be going cross country in this thing. So
No.
you know what I mean?
you're
Like,
going to be around for most of the Jeep's activities when we go off road.
and in the past, you've been towing these things. So
Yeah, we'll probably tow this one too, and I think a little bit of exhaust vibrations are the least of our concerns when we're about to flip the thing
yeah, I
over
mean,
on
there's
the trail.
there's
so.
things we can do if you're like, I can't stand this,
Yeah,
but
no.
at the same time,
Yeah, right.
like I can't believe how much of that turbo whistle is left in this thing. Like
Seriously.
it actually is quite like, I might hit the modify future exhaust doing something like this if people are like, I need more turbo whistle. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, it's 100% whistle, and it's all out the back, which is really cool. I mean, if you saw this thing driving down the road, you'd wonder what is making all that noise.
especially when you
know?
heard that thing spool like that.
Yeah.
So. All right, so this is kind of what I was talking about, Alex.
Yeah, right there.
Now, this actually kind of happens. What we find is usually like using a diameter that doesn't quite work with the exhaust size. So if you go too big, you'll end up in this little resonancy rasp area. And even straight piped, you can run into that issue. We'll typically use the splitting of pipes to kind of tame that down, or resonators, straight through resonators. The problem with this though is that when we put a resonator on there, all that turbo whistle is gone. So we're trying to do something that I don't typically do. Like I wouldn't build an exhaust this way. So I would probably try something that I've used in the past that I don't like building because it's a Band-Aid, and that's the Helmholtz resonator, which is like a little chamber that comes off the side of your exhaust that you can use to dial out a frequency. And this would be perfect for that. The reason I don't use them is because they usually induce an unclean exhaust note into the exhaust if we're trying to build something clean. And I kind of feel like it's just an afterthought. You throw it on there to dial something out. But in this case, when we're trying to keep everything, trying to keep those tones, it actually might be perfect to use in this thing, Alex. Might be worth us looking into it a little bit in the future here. Well, there it is. A turbo Jeep exhaust built entirely out of leftovers, questionable decisions, and just enough luck to hold it all together. It's not pretty, but it works, and most importantly, it sings that turbo whistle like it's auditioning for America's Got Talent. Along the way, we dodged some pretty big hurdles, rerouting the exhaust from the starter, keeping the wastegates in check, and somehow making this mess flow like it was meant to. Sure, it's not polished and it isn't exactly what I like, but it's got personality. And this thing's ready to turn heads and raise eyebrows on the trail, and honestly, that's kind of the point. And that's a wrap on our turbo Jeep build. Proof that budget doesn't have to mean boring, but it means you have to get a little weird and a lot resourceful. Now it's your turn. What's the wildest thing you've ever cobbled together out of scrap? Drop it in the comments and let us know how far you've pushed your DIY envelope. Remember, budget builds might not win beauty contests, but they've got stories to tell, and sometimes that's way cooler than chrome and carbon fiber. Stick around for more builds, more challenges, and hopefully a few less trips to the scrap pile. Until next time, stay loud, stay curious, and maybe try using actual parts for your next project, or not. See you next time.